The last thing I saw was the same cold, white ceiling my mother died under. I heard their laughter, the father who was a gutter-born freeloader, the stepmother who poisoned my mom, and the husband who claimed my skin made him crawl. My heart stopped in that asylum, but my story didn't end there. When my eyes snapped open, a new soul had taken the wheel. I am no longer the naive boy blinded by love. I am a ruthless corporate lawyer with a 100% win rate and a specialty in psychological warfare. I've woken up 24 hours before the wedding that was meant to be my death sentence. They think they've trapped a lamb for the slaughter. They don't realize they've just handed me the easiest case of my career, a total, systematic execution. The first thing I do is breathe. Not from panic, not from grief. I breathe to take inventory, a habit I built over 15 years of depositions, courtrooms, and corporate boardrooms where one wrong exhale could cost a client 9 figures. I breathe to count what I have, what they have, and where the gap between those two things becomes my weapon. The body I'm in is 24 years old, male. The medical records I find in the nightstand drawer, because of course the naive original owner kept his own medical records in his nightstand like a child keeping a diary, tell me his name is Elliot Ashford, heir to the Ashford tech fortune. Estimated net worth, $340 million, locked in a trust that releases the moment he marries. His grandfather, the founder, built the clause into the will himself. Old man loved the institution of marriage. Ironic, because this marriage was designed to be a cage, not a ceremony. I spend 40 minutes in this bed doing nothing but reading. The room is large, Manhattan penthouse, East Side, clean, tastefully furnished, but not by Elliot's taste. I can tell because every personal item in this room has been pushed to the corners. The shelving is staged. This is a room someone else curated to keep Elliot contained and comfortable, the way you'd furnish a luxury kennel. I find his laptop. The password is his mother's birthday. Of course it is. I don't have time for sentiment, so I skip past the personal folders and go directly to the financial documents, the legal files, the emails. Within 20 minutes, I have a complete picture, and it is exactly as sloppy and predictable as every fraudulent family trust case I've tried in my previous life. Let me lay it out, the way I'd brief a junior associate. Richard Ashford, the father. Married into this family through Elliot's late mother, Catherine Ashford, née Voss, who brought the actual capital and the actual bloodline. Richard came with charm, no assets, and a talent for making powerful men feel threatened. He's been bleeding this estate for 11 years, ever since Catherine died. The records show it cleanly. Unauthorized wire transfers framed as household management, a company salary he invented for himself. 3 luxury vehicles on the estate account. He walks around with the posture of a patriarch and the paper trail of a petty thief. Sandra Ashford, the stepmother, a clinical pharmaceutical consultant before she married Richard. The irony of that title is not lost on me. Her background in pharmacology is exactly why Catherine Ashford's death was ruled natural causes and not what it actually was. Sandra is meticulous, well-dressed, and deeply insecure, the kind of woman who smiles at charity galas and sharpens knives at home. She married Richard 6 months after Catherine died. She moved into this penthouse 9 months after that. Trace Ashford, the stepbrother, 26, MBA from Wharton, which he leveraged into a mid-level position at the family's secondary holdings company, a position Richard gave him and no one else endorsed. Trace is brilliant enough to be dangerous and stupid enough to be predictable. He has a savagery complex, the kind of man who cannot be in a room with someone more talented without wanting to dismantle them. He's been dismantling Elliot quietly for years, academically, socially, professionally. And then there is the husband. Cole Whitmore, 32, old money, Boston family, civil engineer turned real estate developer. On paper, distinguished. In practice, a man who agreed to marry someone he openly despises in exchange for a cut of the trust payout once it released. The arrangement was brokered between Cole and Richard 6 months ago. Cole gets 15% of the unlocked trust, roughly $51 million, in exchange for marrying Elliot, keeping him compliant, and then assisting in having him committed to Hargrove Psychiatric Center within 90 days of the wedding on the grounds of a fabricated mental breakdown. Hargrove Psychiatric Center, the same facility where Catherine Ashford spent her final weeks. It is, I will admit, an elegant plan for amateurs. Cole is the linchpin. Without the marriage, the trust doesn't release. Without Cole, Richard's entire scheme collapses. They needed someone Elliot trusted, someone Elliot loved, someone whose betrayal would be too devastating to resist. And the original Elliot, God rest whatever soul he carried, loved Cole Whitmore with the kind of blind, catastrophic devotion that makes a man sign his own ruin with a smile. I am not that man. At 7:42 in the morning, exactly on schedule according to the calendar I found, the penthouse door opens. Cole Whitmore walks in carrying a breakfast tray, eggs Benedict, freshly squeezed orange juice, a small vase with a single white orchid. He is, I'll acknowledge, physically striking. The kind of face that reads as trustworthy in photographs and calculating in person if you know how to look. His smile is practiced. His eyes are already working, already reading the room, already calibrating. He expects to see Elliot's face light up. I give him exactly that. I sit up in the bed and I let my expression do the work. Warm eyes, a soft exhale of relief, the subtle lean forward of someone who has been waiting. I spent 15 years reading people in deposition rooms. Performing their opposite takes no effort. He sets the tray down and sits on the edge of the bed. He reaches for my hand. I let him take it. The conversation that follows is brief, gentle, and completely meaningless. He tells me the venue is ready. He tells me the caterer confirmed. He tells me I looked beautiful. I respond the way the original Elliot would have responded. Grateful, a little emotional, deeply in love with every syllable coming out of this man's mouth. I am logging everything. The way he glances at the nightstand, he's checking whether I've touched anything. The way he angles his phone screen away when it buzzes, he's running a parallel communication with someone, Trace or Richard most likely. The way he squeezes my hand a beat too long before releasing it, that's a tell. He's reassuring himself, not me. After he leaves to oversee the morning preparations, I have 4 hours before the ceremony. I eat the eggs. I am not sentimental enough to waste good food over moral discomfort. Then I open Elliot's legal files, and I get to work. The prenuptial agreement was drafted by the family's law firm, Harwick & Crane, a corporate firm with a decent reputation and a complete blind spot for embedded clauses. I've gone up against their senior partners twice, won both times. Their drafting style is thorough on the surface and lazy underneath. They rely on precedent instead of thinking. The agreement, as written, ties the Ashford Tech intellectual property into the marital estate under New York's equitable distribution framework. Cole's attorneys argued it in as a negotiating point. Sandra likely coached them on how to frame it. It is, by my standards, embarrassingly basic fraud. I find the clause on page 14. I rewrite 3 sentences. I do not change the format. I do not change the font. I do not change the page numbering. What I do is insert language that reclassifies Elliot's tech startup, Ashford Innovations LLC, valued independently at approximately $88 million, as premarital intellectual property held in a separate irrevocable trust protected under the specific language of the Uniform Trust Code, Section 502. The modification takes me 11 minutes. Then I print it from Elliot's home office printer, replace the original page 14 in the agreement binder with the revised version, and put the binder back exactly where it was sitting on the desk. If Harwick & Crane's team does a page-by-page review before signing, they might catch it. But they won't, because today is the wedding day, and no attorney does a detailed document review on the wedding day. They assume the document they reviewed last week is the document in the binder today. That assumption is going to cost Cole Whitmore $88 million. I shower, dress, and stand in front of the mirror in the suit that had been selected for me. White shirt, charcoal tie, Navy suit. Conservative. Classic. The kind of outfit chosen to make me look like a proper, grateful groom. I look at my reflection and I make one adjustment. I switch the tie. Navy suit, white shirt, silver tie. A small thing, but this body, this wedding, this entire day, it belongs to me now. I walk out of that room not as a lamb. I walk out as the only attorney in this building who has already read every clause of the case. The wedding starts in 4 hours. I am ready. Here is something every lawyer learns before they learn anything else. The most effective weapon in any case is never the evidence you present. It's the evidence you allow the opposing party to discover themselves. People dismiss what you tell them. They believe completely what they think they found on their own. Trace Ashford is about to find a great deal on his own.
The wedding is clean, efficient. 40 guests, a venue on the Upper East Side, a restored townhouse with exposed brick and low lighting, the kind of place that photographs well and means nothing. The ceremony runs for 22 minutes. Cole holds my hand at the altar with the practiced warmth of a man who has rehearsed this exact performance in a mirror. I match his energy precisely. I look up at him the way the original Elliot would have, like he is the only source of gravity in the room. I sign the marriage certificate. Page 14 of the prenup is already where I put it. Nobody checks. Harwick and Crane's representative, a junior associate who looks like he graduated 8 months ago, flips through the binder with the focus of someone mentally composing his dinner order. He initials the last page and slides it back across the table without reading a word. $88 million protected in 11 minutes of work. That is the easiest settlement I have ever reached. I have spent the last 4 hours observing Trace Ashford at close range. He is not subtle. He moves through rooms with the energy of someone who has already decided he should own them. He shakes hands too firmly, laughs too loudly at his own commentary, and monitors Cole's position in the room the way a man monitors his own heartbeat, constantly, compulsively, without realizing he's doing it. The affair between Cole and Trace has been running for 14 months, according to the deleted email thread I recovered from Elliot's laptop this morning. Not deleted by Elliot, he never knew. Deleted remotely by Cole from a shared device account. Amateur mistake. Anyone who's handled digital evidence discovery knows deleted files are an invitation, not an erasure. 14 months. Cole has been sleeping with the stepbrother while planning to marry Elliot and split the trust payout with the father. Trace believes he and Cole are partners in this, romantically and financially. Cole has told him enough to keep him cooperative and withheld enough to keep him dependent. This is the structure I am working with. 2 men who are using each other, each believing he is the one doing the using. My job is simply to make that visible. I start at the reception dinner. I find Cole at the bar, talking to 2 of his associates from the development firm. I walk up, slide my hand into his, and lean into him slightly. Not dramatically, just enough. He adjusts his posture automatically, puts his arm around me, and plays the role. I make sure I am laughing at something he says when Trace walks through the door.
Trace sees it immediately. I watch his face from my peripheral. He goes still for exactly 2 seconds, the duration of a man processing something he wasn't prepared for. Then he recovers, gets a drink, and starts a conversation with Sandra. But every 45 seconds, his eyes come back to us. I spend the next 2 hours being the most attentive husband in the room. I bring Cole his drink before he asks for it. I straighten his lapel once, briefly, the way you touch someone you are comfortable owning. I laugh at the right moments, touch his arm during conversation, and at one point rest my head against his shoulder for approximately 4 seconds during a slow song I have no interest in dancing to. Every move is visible to Trace. None of it is for Cole. Cole himself is confused. He expected compliance, not warmth. He expected the original Elliot, grateful and slightly overwhelmed. What he's getting is a version of Elliot that seems entirely comfortable, which is a variable he didn't plan for. I can see him recalculating behind his eyes, deciding whether this is a problem. It isn't a problem for him yet. That comes later. 3 days after the wedding, I begin Phase 2. Cole's home office is on the 3rd floor of the Whitmore family property in Greenwich, Connecticut, where we've relocated for the first month of the marriage. The house is large, well-staffed, and completely wired, because Cole Whitmore is the kind of man who installs security cameras to monitor other people and forgets they also monitor him. I have already mapped every camera's angle. There are 4 blind spots in the house. I use all of them. The document I create takes me 40 minutes. It is a fabricated offshore account statement, Cayman Islands, Whitmore Capital Holdings LLC, a company named close enough to Cole's real development firm to feel authentic, different enough to constitute a separate entity. The statement shows a total balance of $6.3 million, moved in 3 transfers over the last 8 months. The memo lines on each transfer read, personal holding, pre-division, sole distribution. I print it on paper that is not the office paper. I drove to a FedEx in Stamford 2 days ago and printed it there. Paid cash, did not look at the cameras. The paper stock is slightly different from standard. Trace will not notice. People only notice paper stock when they're looking for a forgery, and Trace will be too angry to look for a forgery. I fold the statement once and slide it into the back pocket of Cole's gym bag. Cole doesn't use the gym bag on Thursdays. Trace visits on Thursdays. I know Trace visits on Thursdays because I found his car in the security footage from the week before the wedding. A black Audi, parked 2 blocks down, consistent arrival between 2 and 3 p.m. Cole told the staff Thursdays were his remote work days. Thursdays, the house staff takes the afternoon off. Today is Thursday. I take the afternoon to visit a gallery in the city. I tell Cole I'm going with a friend he's never met. I say her name is Dana. He doesn't ask a follow-up question, which tells me he is glad for the empty house. I stay in the city for 4 hours. When I come back, the gym bag is zipped differently than I left it. Trace found it. The following 72 hours are exactly what I expected, which means they are almost boring to watch. Trace texts Cole 17 times in the first day. Cole, to his credit, stays calm for approximately 36 hours. He's experienced enough to know panic makes things worse. He denies the account exists. He calls it a misunderstanding. He uses the word context twice in one message, which is what people say when they have no context to offer. Trace does not accept this. Because here is the thing about Trace Ashford. His entire participation in this scheme was built on the belief that he and Cole were going to divide the trust payout together. That was the promise. Cole never put it in writing. Cole is not foolish enough to put it in writing, but Trace believed it the way people believe things when they want them badly enough. And now he's looking at a bank statement that suggests Cole was already moving money into a private account, sole distribution, before the trust even releases. The arithmetic is simple. If Cole moves the payout before Trace can access it, Trace gets nothing. The logic is flawed because the document is fabricated, but Trace doesn't know that. And his inferiority complex, that deep structural wound that has been feeding on Elliot's success for years, does not allow him to think clearly when he feels outmaneuvered. He doesn't see a forgery. He sees exactly what he has always suspected, that he is the least important person in every room. By day 3, Trace stops texting Cole. That is more dangerous than the texts. I sent Cole a love note on day 4. Handwritten, cream stationery left on his desk in the morning before he wakes up. It is warm without being excessive. 2 sentences about how glad I am to have married him. 1 sentence about looking forward to building something together. I sign it with my first name. It is the most strategically targeted document I have produced in this entire operation. Cole reads it at his desk. I know because I walk past the office door at the right moment and he shifts it to the side quickly, the way you move something you didn't expect to feel. Trace sees the note 2 hours later. He comes to the house unannounced, which he has never done before. He tells the remaining staff he's visiting his stepbrother. He is upstairs for 11 minutes. When he comes back down, his jaw is set. He passes me in the hallway. I smile at him, quiet, warm, unbothered. He looks at me with the specific anger of a man who has just realized the person he underestimated is the problem he cannot name. I don't need to.
The seed is in the ground. The paranoia is already eating upward. Cole and Trace are now two men sharing a secret, a scheme, and a mounting suspicion that the other one has already decided to leave the other behind. All I did was give that suspicion a single sheet of paper to stand on, and the house is already shaking. Richard Ashford did not build anything in his life. He married into the Ashford name, borrowed its weight, and spent 11 years convincing himself the leverage belonged to him. That is the specific delusion of a man who has never actually created value. He begins to believe that proximity to value is the same as ownership. It is the easiest delusion to weaponize, because a man who has never actually built anything will sign almost any contract that makes him feel like he has. I need to explain Richard clearly, because the approach has to be calibrated to the target. He is 61 years old, no college degree, though he tells people he attended Georgetown and left before graduating, a story nobody has ever verified because nobody important enough has ever bothered to check. His actual background? A sales job in a mid-tier insurance brokerage in Newark, where he met Catherine Ashford at a corporate function she attended on behalf of Ashford Tech's benefits division. Catherine was brilliant, overworked, and lonely. Richard was available, attentive, and completely aware of her net worth within 15 minutes of meeting her. They married within 8 months. Catherine died 4 years later. Since then, Richard has operated the Ashford Family Holdings Company, Ashford Capital Group, as his personal expense account, moving slowly enough that no single transaction crossed the threshold of obvious fraud, but consistently enough that over 11 years he has extracted roughly $14 million in personal benefit from an estate that was not his. He is not sophisticated. He is patient. Those are different things. His core weakness is his ego, specifically its relationship to masculinity and class. Richard grew up without money, and that origin story became the engine of every decision he has ever made. He has spent his entire adult life trying to erase Newark from the way people look at him. He buys the right suits, he uses the right vocabulary, he joins the right clubs. But underneath it, the hunger is still there, the need to be seen as a man of consequence by people he considers above him. Sandra feeds that hunger just enough to keep him manageable. She flatters his business instincts, defers to him in public, and keeps him just confident enough to stay useful to her scheme. It's a functional arrangement. I intend to make it completely dysfunctional. The woman I need for this operation already exists in my network, or rather, she existed in my previous life's network. Her name is Victoria Langston. In my previous life, Victoria was a client. Antitrust litigation, 18 months, we won a settlement that restructured an entire pharmaceutical distribution chain. She is 54, widowed, and operates with the specific authority of a woman who has been underestimated long enough that she has stopped finding it interesting. She runs a private equity firm out of Chicago, has a profile in Forbes, and has the kind of social presence that makes men like Richard Ashford straighten their spine the moment she enters a room. I call her from a new phone I purchased with cash. The conversation is 14 minutes. I explain what I need in the first 3. She agrees in the next 2. We spend the remaining 9 minutes on logistics, because Victoria is efficient, and because she owes me a favor from a deposition I handled in 2019 that kept her name out of a regulatory filing that would have been catastrophic for her firm. She flies into New York the following week. The introduction happens at a charity luncheon at the Mandarin Oriental. Richard attends these events religiously. They are, to him, the performance of belonging. Sandra is supposed to attend with him, but I arrange for Sandra to receive a call that morning from her pharmacist flagging a prescription issue that requires her immediate in-person visit. The prescription issue is fabricated. The pharmacist is a paralegal from my previous firm who owes me 3 years of professional discretion. Sandra spends 90 minutes across town resolving a problem that was never real. Richard arrives at the luncheon alone. Victoria is already there, seated at the table adjacent to the event sponsors, positioned deliberately where the right people will see her and where Richard will have a natural reason to pass by. I am not in the room. I do not need to be. Victoria handles it. I have her debrief afterward. She tells me it took 4 minutes. Richard introduced himself. Victoria listened to him the way she has been trained to listen, completely, without interrupting, with the particular attention that tells a man his words are landing somewhere significant. She asked 2 questions about Ashford Capital Group that were specific enough to suggest she had heard of it, vague enough to require him to explain it in detail. Richard talked about Ashford Capital Group for 22 minutes. He told her things about his business strategy, his leadership philosophy, his vision for the company's next decade. None of it was accurate. All of it was the version of Richard Ashford that Richard Ashford wishes existed. Victoria nodded at the right moments, pushed back gently once, just enough friction to make the flattery feel earned. And by the end of the luncheon, Richard had her number in his phone and the posture of a man who has just been reminded he is important. He texts her that evening. She responds the following morning. Not immediately. I told her to wait. The wait matters. Men like Richard need to feel like they pursued something, not received it. By the end of the 2nd week, Richard is taking Victoria to dinner twice a week and telling Sandra he has late client meetings. Sandra is not stupid, but Sandra is managing 3 other moving pieces right now. Trace's escalating paranoia, the wedding's financial timeline, and her own position within the estate. She files Richard's behavior under manageable problem and keeps moving. That is her mistake. She has always managed Richard from a position of composure, and composure requires bandwidth. I am going to drain her bandwidth from every direction until composure becomes impossible. Right now, I have a father to bankrupt. The contracts come in 2 stages. Stage 1 is the introduction. I reach back into Elliot's business network, the startup ecosystem he built through Ashford Innovations, and I surface 2 opportunities that are structured to look like legitimate corporate partnerships. The first is a distribution agreement with a logistics company based out of Dallas. The second is a licensing deal with a tech firm in Austin. Both companies are real. Both agreements are structured to be real. The surface terms are competitive, reasonable, and exactly the kind of deal a man like Richard would consider beneath him, which means I need to frame them as something he is being selected for specifically. I have a mutual contact send them to Richard with a note that Victoria Langston's firm flagged Ashford Capital Group as a preferred partner, that Richard is being chosen, not solicited, that this is what serious players in the market are offering each other. Richard signs both agreements within 10 days. He does not have them reviewed by outside counsel. He uses Ashford Capital Group's in-house attorney, a single, underpaid lawyer named Gerald who has been with the company for 6 years and who processes whatever Richard puts in front of him because the alternative is unemployment. Richard does not tell Gerald that the agreements came through a personal introduction from a woman he is having an affair with. He tells Gerald the deals are already approved and just need signatures processed. Gerald, to his professional detriment, does not push back. The distribution agreement contains a penalty clause buried in Section 8, subsection C. The clause triggers if Ashford Capital Group fails to meet quarterly minimum volumes. The minimums are set at 340% of the company's actual operational capacity. No company of Ashford Capital Group's size could meet them. They were designed not to be met. The penalty per missed quarter, $2.1 million, payable within 30 days with a compounding interest provision that activates at day 31. The licensing deal is cleaner in construction, but worse in consequence. It contains an exclusivity clause that prevents Ashford Capital Group from entering into any competing agreement with firms in the same vertical for 36 months. The vertical is defined broadly enough to cover 40% of the company's existing client base. 3 of Ashford Capital Group's largest corporate clients, a pharmaceutical group, a regional bank, and a manufacturing consortium, fall directly within that definition. The moment those clients are flagged under the exclusivity restriction, Ashford Capital Group is in breach of its existing service contracts with them. The clients are notified by their own legal teams within 6 weeks. All 3 terminate their agreements with Ashford Capital Group simultaneously. The combined annual revenue those 3 clients represented, $18.4 million. The first penalty payment under the distribution agreement comes due in the same month. Richard doesn't have the liquidity. He tries to renegotiate. The Dallas firm declines and refers the matter to their collections attorneys. The clock starts on the compounding interest. Richard calls me twice during this period. The calls are brief, tense, and framed as a man who is managing a situation. He does not ask for help. He asks for a contact who might be able to assist with some cash flow pressure. He uses the words temporary and minor adjustment. I recommend a financial consultant. The consultant is not mine. He is simply competent and completely unaware of the broader situation. He looks at Ashford Capital Group's books and tells Richard what I already know. Without emergency restructuring and new client acquisition, the company will be insolvent in 18 months. Richard hangs up the phone on him. He drives to Victoria's apartment. I know this because Victoria texts me a single word 40 minutes later, exactly as we arranged. Arrived. She keeps him occupied for 3 hours. She tells him the market is difficult right now, that even strong operators are feeling pressure, that his instincts are sound even if the timing is against him. She pours him a 16-year-old scotch he cannot identify, but pretends to recognize. He drives home at midnight believing he has one person in his corner who sees his actual worth. He does not know that person is my instrument. He does not know his company has 14 months left. He does not know that Sandra, back at the penthouse, spent the evening reviewing the household accounts and found the first of the restaurant charges she cannot account for. A dinner for 2 at a restaurant on the Upper West Side on a night Richard said he was in a client meeting in Midtown. The marriage is starting to develop a crack.
I didn't force it open. I simply gave it the right pressure at the right point. That is all a good lawyer ever does. Every case has a closing argument. It is the moment where you stop presenting evidence and start making the jury feel the weight of everything they've already seen. You don't introduce new facts at this stage. You reframe the facts that exist until the verdict feels not just correct, but inevitable. The closing argument for this case required one final layer. The legal traps were set. The financial ruin was in motion. The relationship between Cole and Trace had deteriorated from a covert affair into something that looked closer to a Cold War. Texts read and not answered, a weekend in the Greenwich house where they were in the same room for 40 minutes and spoke for 3 of them. But I needed more than ruin. Ruin can be recovered from. People restructure, regroup, and rebuild. Lawyers know this better than anyone. Half of bankruptcy law exists specifically to give people a second attempt. I did not intend to give these 4 people a second attempt. What I needed was for the ruin to get inside them. Sandra Ashford's pharmacological background was the foundation of the original plan against Elliot. The drug protocol she designed was elegant in the way that dangerous things often are. A specific combination of halocaridol and a modified benzodiazepine compound administered in microdoses over a sustained period through daily supplements and prepared beverages, designed to produce symptoms consistent with a deteriorating psychiatric condition. Paranoid ideation, auditory disturbance, dissociative episodes, the kind of symptoms that combined with a fabricated medical history and the testimony of a cooperative psychiatrist would result in involuntary commitment without significant legal resistance. I found the full protocol in Sandra's private files. She stored them on an encrypted drive she kept in her vanity drawer behind a false panel she presumably considered hidden. It was not hidden. It was simply inside a drawer that someone like Elliot would never have thought to open with intent. I am not someone like Elliot. The protocol was designed for 1 target. I redesigned it for 4. The modifications took me 2 evenings. I am not a pharmacologist, but I am a lawyer who has spent 15 years litigating pharmaceutical cases, and that means I have read more clinical trial documentation, adverse event reports, and expert witness depositions on controlled substances than most practicing physicians. I know exactly what these compounds do at which dosages. I know how they interact with stress. sleep disruption, and elevated cortisol. I know that a person under severe psychological pressure, financial ruin, relationship collapse, acute paranoia, metabolizes these compounds differently than a person at baseline. The four of them were not at baseline. They had not been at baseline for weeks. Cole's supplements were the simplest substitution. He kept a regimented morning routine, a multivitamin, a B complex, a magnesium tablet, all lined up on the bathroom shelf in the Greenwich house with the orderliness of a man who believes discipline is a personality. I replaced the contents of each bottle over the course of 4 days, 1 bottle per day, using gel capsules I prepared and sealed myself. The process was not complicated. It required patience and a pair of clean gloves. Cole noticed nothing. He's the kind of man who trusts systems he has already verified once and does not re-examine them. He built a routine and assumed the routine was still what he built. He took his supplements every morning with black coffee and a half glass of water and went downstairs to his office. For Richard and Sandra, the delivery mechanism was the household. I had been carefully integrated into the Whitmore family social calendar by this point. Sunday dinners at the Ashford penthouse were a standing event, a performance of family unity that everyone attended and nobody enjoyed. The kitchen staff prepared meals. I brought wine. Twice, I brought a specialty sparkling water brand I introduced as something a sommelier had recommended, which nobody questioned because it is the kind of detail that sounds like it requires no further scrutiny. It did not require further scrutiny. Trace was the most straightforward. He came to the Greenwich house on Thursdays. Cole, increasingly desperate to manage Trace's paranoia and keep the scheme intact, kept making space for those visits despite the fact that they consistently ended badly. Trace ate lunch at the house. The kitchen was mine to navigate. I navigated it. The gaslighting was an augmentation, not a replacement. The drugs created the physiological conditions, the frayed nerves, the disrupted sleep, the baseline paranoia, the moments where perception and reality stopped corresponding cleanly. The environment I constructed gave that paranoia specific shapes to attach itself to. The estate in Greenwich is old. The bones of old houses make noise, pipes, settling wood, air through window frames. I did not need to create sounds. I needed to make sounds feel deliberate. I moved things, small things. Cole's phone, placed 6 inches from where he left it. A document on his desk turned 45 degrees. The family photograph in the hallway rehung 1 inch lower than its original position. Imperceptible unless you look at it every day, which Cole did. These are the kinds of alterations that don't register consciously. They register in the body first. A persistent sense that something is not quite level, that the ground is slightly softer than it was yesterday. I left a voicemail on the house landline from a number registered to a shell contact I'd created referencing a wire transfer amount that matched almost exactly the figure from the fabricated offshore statement Trace had found in Cole's gym bag. Not the same number, close enough that someone already suspicious would hear it and feel their suspicion confirmed. Cole heard it. He stood in the hallway for a long time after listening to it. Then he went and poured himself a drink at 10 a.m., which was new behavior. Sandra began conversations she did not remember initiating. She would come downstairs in the morning convinced she had already spoken to the housekeeper, referencing instructions she had not given, confused when the housekeeper had no record of the exchange. She started sleeping with the bedroom door locked, then with a chair against the door. Richard stopped going to the office. He worked from home, or said he was working from home, though from what I could observe he was primarily sitting in the study and drinking. Victoria had begun creating strategic distance at my guidance. She was becoming less available, more vague, the warmth cooling by careful degrees. Richard was losing his financial anchor and his emotional one simultaneously. He became irritable in a way that had no specific target, which meant it landed on Sandra. Their arguments stopped being about the affair. Sandra had confronted him, he had denied it inadequately. They had moved into a cold hostility that was more damaging than open conflict. Cold hostility requires no resolution, it simply accumulates. Trace stopped trusting his own memory of events. He and Cole had 2 phone calls during this period that Cole later described to him differently than Trace remembered them. Not dramatically differently, slightly. Enough that Trace couldn't be sure which version was accurate, which meant he couldn't be sure his memory was functioning correctly, which meant he couldn't be sure about anything he thought he knew. The human mind under sustained uncertainty does not go quiet, it gets louder. It fills the uncertainty with the worst available explanation, because the worst available explanation feels more like control than no explanation at all. All 4 of them were filling silence with explanations. None of the explanations were correct. None of them were entirely wrong either. That is the precision of it. I did not fabricate their crimes. I simply accelerated the consequences of crimes they had already committed and pointed those consequences at each other. I was not the cause of their collapse. I was the conditions under which their collapse became unavoidable. The trust fund was released on a Tuesday. I know the exact moment because I was in the family attorney's office when it happened, seated across the desk from a man named Harold Fitch, who had managed the Ashford estate accounts for 19 years, and who looked at me with the expression of someone who has watched enough of these moments to find them neither moving nor interesting. $340 million released into the Ashford primary trust account. The marriage had satisfied the condition. The condition had been satisfied by a man who had rewritten the terms of the marriage before signing it. Elliot Ashford's intellectual property, separately protected, irrevocable, untouched. Cole Whitmore's contractual entitlement under the prenuptial agreement, effectively 0, because the clause entitling him to the 15% payout was contingent on a marital asset structure that no longer existed in the form the agreement assumed. Harwick and Crane's team realized this on the same Tuesday. The call they placed to Cole that afternoon lasted 41 minutes. I know because I was in the next room, and Cole's voice, which is normally controlled, was not controlled. He came out of the office and looked at me across the hallway. Just looked. And I looked back, calm, pleasant, the way I have been looking at him for months, like a man completely at ease in his own life. He couldn't find the seam. That was the problem for all of them in the end. They kept looking for the seam, the moment where the trap became visible, where the architecture showed itself. They never found it, because I never built a trap that required concealment. I built conditions. Conditions look like bad luck. Conditions look like consequence. Conditions look like the universe correcting itself. Nobody goes to prison for conditions. The commitment proceedings moved through the system with the specific speed of cases where the evidence is comprehensive and the subjects are in no condition to mount a coherent defense. Richard and Sandra attempted to poison each other. I will not dramatize this because it does not require dramatization. It is simply what happened when 2 people who had been chemically destabilized, financially ruined, and maritally destroyed found themselves alone in a penthouse with access to the same pharmaceutical knowledge that had killed Catherine Ashford. Each of them, independently, reached for the same solution. Each of them underestimated the other's willingness to reach for it first. They survived. That was always going to be the outcome. The doses were insufficient to be fatal. Sandra knew exactly what lethal looked like and stayed below it, and Richard, who was working from memory of a conversation he'd half heard years ago, got the compound wrong. What they produced in each other was a psychiatric emergency severe enough to require hospitalization, and, given the evidence recovered from Sandra's vanity drawer and cross-referenced with Catherine Ashford's autopsy records, which I had quietly requested through a contact at the medical examiner's office 3 months prior, a criminal investigation. Cole, by that point, was not a reliable witness to anything. The combination of the drug protocol and the total collapse of his financial scheme had produced the exact symptom cluster Sandra had designed for Elliot: paranoid ideation, auditory disturbance, dissociation. He called the police twice in 1 week to report that Trace was in the house attempting to kill him.
Trace was not in the house. Trace was in a psychiatric evaluation at Presbyterian Hospital, where he had been admitted after an incident at a restaurant in Midtown that 3 witnesses described as a complete departure from rational behavior. 4 people, 3 weeks, 0 of them left standing. The criminal case against Sandra for Catherine Ashford's death moved faster than the civil proceedings. The medical examiner's findings, the recovered pharmaceutical protocol, and the financial records showing Sandra's payments to the cooperative psychiatrist who had falsified Catherine's deteriorating mental health history, it was, as evidentiary packages go, comprehensive. The kind of case where the defense attorney looks at the file on day 1 and begins calculating plea options. No plea was offered. I made sure of that through a contact in the DA's office who owed me a professional courtesy from a case I'd handled in a prior life. The DA prosecuted fully. The jury took 6 hours.
All 4 were eventually committed to Hargrove Psychiatric Center. Richard and Sandra on criminal grounds, pending sentencing. Cole and Trace on involuntary psychiatric holds that converted to long-term placements as their conditions showed no stabilization. The specific room they were assigned to was not my doing. That was the facility's standard procedure for patients requiring co-supervision. It was simply the available room in the secure ward. It happened to be room 14. I know it was room 14 because that is the room number on Catherine Ashford's final records, which I had been carrying in a folder in my briefcase for 11 weeks. Some things do not require engineering. You simply leave space for them and let the geometry of justice do its own work. I visit on a Thursday, not for symmetry. Thursdays are simply the visiting window for the secure ward, and I am a man who respects schedules. The suit is charcoal, Italian wool, cut close. White shirt, no tie, because I am not here on business. The cufflinks are simple, brushed silver. I had my hair cut 2 days ago. I am, by any external measure, a man who has no problems. The attendant leads me through 2 sets of secured doors and down a corridor that smells of industrial cleaner and recycled air. The walls are the same flat white they have always been. Facilities like this don't update their aesthetics. There is no budget for aesthetics here. Room 14 has a reinforced window. I stand at it for a moment before the attendant opens the observation panel. The 4 of them are inside. Richard is in the far corner, seated, not doing anything in particular. He has the look of a man whose engine has stopped, no performance left, no posture to maintain. The suits are gone, the club membership, the curated vocabulary, the careful erasure of Newark, all of it stripped away by a room that does not care what you used to perform. Sandra is on the opposite side of the room, which tells me everything about the current state of their marriage. She is composed in the way that people are composed when composure is the last thing they have left. She is watching the door. She has always been the one watching. Trace is pacing, short circuits, back and forth, the kinetic energy of a man whose mind will not settle. He glances at Cole repeatedly, with the specific exhausted hatred of people who cannot escape each other. Cole is by the window. He has his arms crossed. He sees me first. His face does something complicated. Recognition, recalculation, and then, underneath both of those, the slow arrival of an understanding he cannot fully articulate. He is not well enough to articulate it clearly, but he is well enough to know in whatever way the mind knows things before it can name them, that the person standing on the other side of this glass is not who they appeared to be. That is the only acknowledgement I require from him. The attendant opens the door. I step inside. I do not move far into the room, just past the threshold, enough to be present, not enough to suggest I intend to stay. I look at them in turn. Richard, Sandra, Trace, Cole. None of them speak. That is fine. I did not come here for a conversation. I reach up and adjust my left cufflink, a small gesture. An old habit from courtrooms, something to do with your hands when you want to look completely unbothered in a moment that the room believes should bother you. Then I look at all 4 of them and I say the only thing there is left to say. Welcome to your new home. A pause, not for effect, simply because the next sentence deserves its own space. It's exactly what you deserved. I turn and walk back through the door. The attendant closes it behind me. I do not look back through the window. There is nothing in that room I need to see again. In the corridor, I pull out my phone. Harold Fitch has sent the final account confirmation. The trust, fully transferred, fully restructured, fully under my control. $340 million, plus the protected valuation of Ashford Innovations LLC, which has, in the months since the wedding, signed 2 enterprise contracts that have pushed its independent valuation past the $100 million mark. Catherine Ashford built something real. It is still real, and it is mine now, not by theft, not by scheme, but the oldest legal principle in existence: survival of the rightful heir. I put the phone away and walk down the corridor toward the exit. The door opens onto a clean, bright afternoon. Manhattan in October, air with some weight to it. The city doing what the city does, indifferent, constant, requiring nothing from me. I have no more cases pending. For the first time in either of my lives, the docket is clear. I straighten my jacket, step onto the sidewalk, and walk.
The end.